Emerson Gale. He's a new student in the PCC program. He grew up with artist parents, willow weavers, that encouraged him to expand his mind and his creativity. And he's jumped into the PCC program like with both feet. He's already started these cosmic jam sessions on Wednesdays for musicians. And he has done some really cool things in his life. He taught English in China and also did a program there for a thesis on migrant workers and education and liberation of migrant workers. And then he went to London and did something similar. What exactly did you do in London?
with refugees from the Middle East conflicts.
Yes. And so he's here to just expand all those possibilities, interests that he has, like political and philosophical. And he's really interested in agency and free will and how that plays out in our daily lives. So give it up for Emerson.
Thank you. Thank you to every person here. And it's all good, and all our ancestors here. And, you know, we realize that we are experiencing things for one another. So we're also experiencing this for those not present, because they are present through us. Ha! I like that. Okay, so I'd like to start out a quick visual cue. It's interesting what happens sometimes. Like we have pastels, we open up, we do some lines, that turns into something else. So that this summer, this came out, which is sort of the landscape scene, and then I made a purple dash. Like it just somehow like fell on the page by accident. I'm like, okay, what am I gonna do with this big purple dash? It turned out to be this harp, and then this other harp, but then the other one never got strung, and it kind of left this creative tension, but I decided to keep it this way. And I think this is a good way to begin what I feel this presentation is, which is an invitation. This presentation is an invitation to talk about how we can unlock creative potential, which we see in such a myriad of forms, so willing, so ready, desiring to come through our many facets. And yet there's a lot going on in our lives, and it requires a lot of navigation. So it kind of raises that question, you know, where are the strings? Are they strung? Sometimes do we need to put new strings on? How do we play them? Who's playing? Is the sun playing? A little bit of atmosphere, you know, or everything's playing. So with that being said, I'm just going to do one more visual cue before which is this. This was another sort of just stream of consciousness piece that evolved through layers. And I think what I'm going to approach the topic of my talk, participation and autonomy, it's inspired by, in a way, wrestling, although I'm trying to turn it into a love affair with the question of free will. And that's why I got into philosophy in the first place. Because clearly, although certain, we could say, reductionist accounts that taught commonly in public education, which I fraternized with, which is that of sort of being highly individualized, which is extremely empowering. And we can see, for example, through the Passion of the Western Mind, through Richard Bella's work, how the flourishing of the human spirit is such that the will continues to unfurl and become increasingly localized while also further interconnected. And I think we're at a time, clearly, we're a balancing point where it's essential we remember this, all the layers going on and our connection. And as we observed, if you observe, these certain birds will follow the waves, and they're tuned into these things we can't see, and then we can also see things for them. So it's very much, we realize this is very much a social project, but the question is, how do we know ourselves? How do we place ourselves within that? So it really comes down to self-responsibility, and that's what motivated my interest in education in the first place, because growing up as a young kid, I was very frustrated. I'll always remember this moment, being 11, being in social studies class, 7th grade, and George Bush was on the TV announcing that he was going to, well, he didn't say it was illegal, but it was illegal because he broke a ton of laws, which we know, but to go into Afghanistan and Iraq and everything. And clearly there's just, I was just shocked that I was the only one the only person in the class that was outraged by this, and I was really concerned that I wasn't feeling compassion. Everyone was just kind of going along, and it seems it raises this creative tension of disconnect. And I think free will, and examining it further, is a way into a more unitive life amidst the many complicating variables we find ourselves enmeshed. So to begin with, I think I should read, I'm just going to read this quote from Jung. Here we go. This is in Memories, Dreams, and Reflections. Our age has shifted all emphasis to the here and now, and thus brought about a demonization of man and his world. The phenomenon of dictators and all the misery they have wrought springs from the fact that man has been robbed of transcendence by the short-sightedness of the super-intellectuals. Like them, he has fallen a victim to unconscious. But man's task is the exact opposite, to become conscious of the contents that press upward from the unconscious. Neither should he persist in his unconsciousness, nor remain identical with the unconscious elements of his being, thus evading his destiny, which is to create more and more consciousness. And here we go. As far as we can discern, the sole purpose of human existence is to kindle a light in the darkness of mere being. It may even be assumed that just as the unconscious affects us, so the increase in our consciousness affects the unconscious. And I'm going to suggest that in our unfolding role of participation, this numinous power that we would see of a one, if the infinite one is free to create, then surging through, just like a drop of the ocean, in a way represents the whole ocean, and us being that drop. And we are in all these waves and currents, but that drop also then would thus resonate the power of the one to be self-creating. And we see this a lot with the talk of self-governance, autopoiesis. So I'm just going to flip to my notes pages here, stay on task. Cool. I just want to do a quick thing, because we just talked about participation. It'd seem a little silly if we didn't do any of that. So really quickly, wake up our minds. I think sometimes just a little creative nudge can help a lot. So I would ask, I can give you a little beat to start on. If we could all clap the beat. If you feel any variations, rock out. Anything you feel called, dance, whatever it is. Just quickly, just wake ourselves up a little bit, and I'll riff off of that. So maybe, does anyone have a beat, or I'll just start a beat. So here, I'll just start the basic, 4/4. Good. We like that. Yeah. Right on. Sweet. Okay. Onwards and upwards, as they say. Let's see how we're doing on time. Oh dear. Okay. All right. Well, quick definition of terms. So participation, what we just did, in a sense. Autonomy, I would like to define here as dignity. Interactive, the essential nature of subjects, as in that line of Joanna Macy's work. Cosmology, an account, a way of interpretation. I think inherently it's a social product. So again, this is, if you remember one thing from today, it's about invitation. It's really about invitation. Wholeness. So participation and autonomy, interactive cosmology of wholeness. I think much of what we're working with is, in a daily manner, very practically, is the deep need to feel whole. But how do you be whole in a very changing, fluid environment where there's this thing called self-responsibility, and you're trying to figure out that tricky. So with that being said, I'm just going to have ask for a quick dialogue. If you could turn to someone next to you and just share in a couple sentences just what comes stream of consciousness. When you hear the word free will, what do you think? Couple sentences. Nice. Then switching to the other person if you haven't yet. Ten seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 2, 2, 1. Bringing it back. Bringing it back. All right, y'all. High five. Good times. Any quick things that popped out anyone would like to share? That felt moving?
Yeah, we were talking about Aurobindo described as freedom, unity, bliss.
Nice.
Aurobindo talks of freedom, unity, bliss. That's where we're all heading. So we might not have free will.
Can we leave that open? Freedom, unity, bliss. Nice combination. Anyone else? I heard maybe a what the fuck when free will is waste. I like that. I agree. That's what I felt for a little while. Or I still feel. Bollocks. Nice. An illusion. Woo. See, it gets provocative quickly. Yep. Definitely. Keeps it going. So with Aurobindo, I like that was brought in. I'm going to just share a couple quick quotes in that line of thought. So here we go. This is in the Essential Aurobindo. Local favorite. Okay. Man is there to move from the ignorance and from the little life which he is in his mind and body to the knowledge and the large divine life which he can compass by the unfolding of the Spirit. Prophetic, here we go. At least the opening out of the Spirit in him, the knowledge of his real self, and the leading of the spiritual life must be attained before he can go definitively and forever otherwhere. There may too be beyond this initial culmination a great flowering of the Spirit in the human life, of which we have as yet only the first intimations. So what I feel especially suggested in that, in relation to the question of free will, is this sense in which it is pointing us towards something that we have just starting on, just beginning, and it's evolving as we speak. And so again, it's an invitation to look deeper at ourselves. I think this is a creative tension we hold in us on purpose, because it pushes us towards really unlocking our self-knowledge. And critically, what I'd like to suggest is that that's necessarily a heart-mind interconnected knowledge. For a long time, for about 6 years, I've been thinking about this question. Well, that's not a long time, actually. Young grasshopper, right here. Yeah, so, but other people have, and that's really great. And a lot of that is, it gets really intellectual. And then this whole analysis paralysis thing comes in, and you circle around it, but we're all interconnected, and so how can I be just a free, and then so it gets so, necessarily we need the heart. And so I'm really going to try to weave that through, that's a huge part of it, that we cannot, first of all, this question begs an infinite answer. So it's not just solvable, because the question is, who are we, really, such that this. And necessarily, the heart element, which in some ways, even in PCC, because we have these great powers of the mind, we can forget that right here holds so much of that foundation to our understanding. And that's where the creativity, the self-permission, the invitation to go deeper flows in. Another quick Aurobindo quote: "The spiritual process of evolution is then in some sense a creation, but a self-creation, not a making of what never was, but a bringing out of what was implicit in the being." So what is this feeling like we make choices, or that we have this localized garden, this local tending, of life? What is that saying about the deep nature of being? What's trying to come through us through this provocation? Okay. So I mentioned why it's important, social justice. I think one of the biggest reasons, we just put, worldwide hundreds of thousands of people in prison because, they chose to do that. So as a result, they need to be punished. And of course, I'm not saying we shouldn't have prison necessarily, clearly we have to evolve, and then the re-entry system, it brings up a lot of things, but there's obviously a point, especially with an adversarial system, that it sets it up where there's a strong amount of judgment, and this assumption about free will is unfortunately subtly, but quite obviously when you start to see it, really at the fore of how we're looking at each other, and then presuming intentionality, and then they talk about mediation, but that really ignores the extreme amount of conditionality that we are a convergence point of. And so again, that's why I define autonomy as dignity, because this is about going deeper with respect for this really complicated unfolding that we're a part of. Right. So I wanted to bring in the quote here that Tom mentioned from Nietzsche in his lecture: "All pain is birth pain," and then relating that to worldviews create world, which Jeff Krohn brought up. I think when we combine this, it helps us lean into this. I think initially this can be pretty scary, I think we all grapple with it through our life. This feeling of, wanting and needing to be connected necessarily, but also needing to hold space, that we're our own vessel of being, and constantly navigating. This is where all this social intelligence, emotional comes in, and it's this dance, and it's very much experiential. There's no exact rules, although I think what's really optimistic is PCC, for example, is a great convergence point of there are histories, so many different models for having to do this work of discernment. So I think we have the tools. It's just bringing them together, seeing them in a new light, and realizing the will isn't static. It keeps going new places, so we can't just assume we got it locked down. Right. Oh yeah, so another quick audience participation. So it's pretty gnarly being here, being human, self-responsibility thing. Can you give someone near you a high five for just being incarnated? Nice. So I'm gonna turn quickly to the passion of the Western mind. I think Thomas Aquinas is a fascinating figure when it comes to trying to look at freedom and unlocking creativity. So Thomas Aquinas. So here we go in the words of Professor Tarnas. For Aquinas, the mystery of being was inexhaustible, but that mystery opened up to man, radiantly if never completely, to the direct development of his God-given intelligence. So God shooed man onward from within to seek perfection, to know a fuller participation in the absolute, to move beyond himself and return to his source. And then expanding that, only if man were genuinely free could he be capable of freely loving God, of freely realizing his exalted spiritual status. So I think what he's doing here with this combination, it's moving beyond himself and returning to the source. I think it goes back to suggesting this requires a deep embrace where we're at. And it's not about trying to solve our situation. It seems patience is a key component of this journey with all these radical changes and twists along the way. But it does seem to be something to be in that there is this conscious intentionality where we can feel scattered and will ourselves to revere and to slow down and to tap in. So I think that does provide some hope within what seems almost immediately as when we start poking at reality to be really difficult to actually make any solid judgment, especially with our postmodern deconstructing. I mean, you can just take anything down and put it in quotes and make arrows, and it gets really exciting. Okay, so I was journaling about this the other day, and I thought this might be useful. Here we go. This is what I'm trying to feel, and so again, this is an invitation. I really hope this opens up more conversations about this, because I'm hoping we can look at this more in the midst of what we're talking about, all these different angles. And I'm sure we already are, but it's very much a social project. We all have something to lend because we're all unique expressions of this principle. So, but here's part of why I'm feeling it's important. I wrote, free will is a stunning call to know thyself, the answer to which has the potential to be a cornerstone of an accelerated human ecological awakening. As we get more in touch with this incredible opportunity that we're giving to create in many different ways, I think necessarily we're tapping into a lot, and we're speeding up our personal, but then rippling out interpersonal ability to respond to change and to be fluid, which we could use a few drops of that, let's be honest. So yeah, and I think that totally vibes out with Thomas Berry's call to living on the earth in a mutually enhancing manner. So it's reciprocity. So it makes sense there's something emerging from within, and necessarily it's a meeting point, and we find ourselves here doing that. Going to the beloved Professor Swim with Thomas Berry and the Universe Story. Only by dealing with difficulty does creativity come forth. So again, I think we're seeing this issue of the murkiness in which we find ourselves as a challenge to show up. Yeah, good times, I hope. And that combines together, I sense sort of an allurement happening, and then a desire to satisfy that allurement with human participation in a sense, which is not, we have to of course deconstruct, it's not just human participation, it's all the ancestors, it's also the plants communicating, the breakfast we ate is participating. I mean, there's, so again, it's not about closing it down, but just suggesting, oh, hey, are these some ways to think about, I have power. It's essentially about empowerment, invitation, yeah, cool. We like that. Good times. So I'm going to turn to Whitehead here in Process and Reality. And here we go. 85, yes. All right. Sweet. So the subjective aim is not primarily intellectual. It is lure for feeling. Skipping ahead a little. The breath of feeling which creates a new individual fact has an origination not wholly traceable to the mere data. It conforms to the data in that it feels the data, but the how, italicized, of feeling, the how of feeling, though it is germane to the data, is not fully determined by the data. The relevant feeling is not settled as to its inclusions or exclusions of subjective form by the data about which the feeling is concerned. The concrescent process is the elimination of these indeterminations of subjective forms. The quality of feeling has to be definite in respect to the eternal objects with which the feeling clothes itself in its self-definition. It is a mode of ingression of internal objects into the actual occasion. And then critically, and I'll just for the sake of time, then he makes a point that an actual occasion is causa sui, which means self-generating. So he says the relevance of an eternal object in the role of a lure is a fact inherent to the data. So I hear him here dancing with, and I think the critical point is sort of where it starts, that a new individual fact has an origination not wholly traceable to the mere data. I think that, in a way, helps us remember and saves us from feeling we're just a product, which is, I think with a free will question, it opens up extremes. It's very quick to get into polarities and paradoxes when this question comes up. And I think this is one of them where we can go, oh, I'm just a result of this. And same with the prison thing. By deconstructing the issue with putting people in prison and that saying they chose to do that, we could go so far and say, oh, well, they're just the data of their life using this sort of language, and that's just the result. And Whitehead's critically saying here, no, there's something more happening than that. And then he goes unpack it in all this wild language. We like that. Good times. So, so I think that's really important, and that's where this self-responsibility thing, I think, comes in prominently, because we still want to encourage ourselves and others to really revere and tend this land, this will. So it's very much a balance. It's a being in between and being patient to be in between and cool with that, and maybe dancing about it. Yeah. And okay. Oh, and then I think we have yes. Now we're going to go to our Aurobindo because I think he comes in here nicely. But how do we do this? Sounds pretty wild to me. Here's a couple thoughts about that. Oh dear. Okay. All life is the play of universal force. This is the essential Aurobindo. All life is the play of universal forces. The individual gives a personal form to these universal forces. But he, I would say she, but he can choose whether he shall respond or not to the actions of a particular force. Archetypes being multivalent, good times? Okay. Only most people do not really choose. They indulge the play of the forces. Your illness, depressions, etc. are the repeated play of such forces. It is only when one can make oneself free of them that one can be a true person and have a true life. But one can be free only by living in the divine. Yeah. Thank you, Aurobindo. I don't know if that made things clear. But I think the key part here is sort of a statement like that, which we see, I think, in a lot of other authors through time that are working with this question about free will, is they're trying to, at least with the language, help us feel that there is some sense of intentionality here available to us. That we could just be the product, and maybe a lot of life we may operate that way, and that's maybe okay. That's how we're supposed to be. We're supposed to be a bit unconscious, and that's cool. But I think clearly, and we bringing ecology into this and the creative urgency around that, it's obviously a time to wake up and sense the depths of our intentionality. And so I think another Aurobindo quote that goes well with that: the supreme, the all-conscious self, the Godhead, the infinite, is not solely a spiritual existence, remote and ineffable. He is here in the universe at once hidden and expressed through man and the gods and through all beings and in all that is. And it is by finding him not only in some immutable silence, but in the world and its beings and in all self and in all nature. It is by raising to an integral as well as to a highest union with him all the activities of the intelligence, the heart, the will, the life that man can solve at once his inner riddle of self and God, and the outer problem of his active human existence. Made godlike, God becoming, he can enjoy the infinite breath of a supreme spiritual consciousness that is reached through works no less than through love and knowledge. Immortal and free, he can continue his human action from the highest level and transmute it into a supreme and all-embracing divine activity. That is indeed the ultimate crown and significance here of all works and living and sacrifice in the world's endeavor. And so I think in here, palpably after sort of that talk about intentionality, then I think here he's expressing how that intentionality, in a way, is an embrace of our deep divine nature, which I think he's suggesting has an incredible, beyond words even, because he's saying how it includes the heart and will, all these things, a deep, inescapable intentionality. And by marrying ourselves to that intentionality as already participants in it, then we are opening up that illumination, and transmute, I think, was an essential part in that alchemical language relating to, multivalence, the archetypes. I think that these words, again, I think part of it is with this question, we just seriously need some new symbols. We need a new mythos around the will, and that's where I think creativity and the heart's essential part. And so it's a searching here, and I'm excited to be dialoguing with you all, as we have been, about what that's going to look like, that model by which we can help unlock ourselves more. Because I think, when we have all these different profound intimations and experiences, we get the sense that there's so much happening, there's so much we can do, and it's almost overwhelming. So yeah, good times. Okay. Moving on. Right. Shall we do that? Women's satisfaction, central. Oh yeah, I think it's really important to remember we're not alone. I think in the free will talk, we can suddenly get hyper individual, like, oh, it's all up to me, and sad face and all that. But we're not alone, as Whitehead says in Process Reality. Each task of creation is a social effort employing the whole universe. Yeah, so necessarily this question calls all of our being, all of our intelligence to rally and feel, where are we going? And then, present age. Yeah, so I'm just going to go to a Steiner quote quickly. The present age calls for one thing, and that is to look honestly into our own interiority and come to know impartially our own spirit, the spirit that illuminates the soul from inside, as it were. I shall return to this later when I describe it as the third level of the initiation required in our time, in italics, initiation of self-knowledge. When spiritual science speaks of the soul, it must speak out of the spirit of these three levels of initiation, by the cosmos, by the sages, by self-knowledge. In doing so, it traverses the different boundaries of soul life, in italics, but it is impossible to begin to take even the first steps on this path without love. Boom. So I think love is what, obviously brings together the sages, the cosmos, the self-knowledge. I think the cosmos, we clearly have pretty profound unlocking of that. We're doing well with that. The sages, yeah, hosts of them and bringing them together. Self-knowledge, I think of the three here, the self-knowledge one is probably the one that's most contested in some ways, because yeah, the sages and the cosmos form it, but the thing is, any narrative written, the coding can be left open, but there's a certain way in which it kind of crystallizes, and then it's a crystal to some degree, and crystals can only change so much. But the self-knowledge piece is sort of a radical, everyday, every moment lived experience, possibility, self-reflection that we then are all contributing to this process. We're all informing one another what the will means. I might go, let's see, 10:45. Sorry about not having questions. I had to start a little later just then. I just want to leave you guys with a little more juice. I think a really good, going back to the creativity and visuals, a really nice symbol for this is sort of the Zen circle. It's coming around the brushstroke, and then it's just barely, not quite touching the end. And I would suggest that's helped me in this healing process of trying to reconcile a feeling, a sort of split that this question raises about, oh, we're all interconnected, but also I'm self-responsible, and then there's this tension. I think the circle helps us see that we are this deep emanation, this permeation of will to be, right? And the circle then at the end is sort of then bubbling up through us from the interior, excited by the exterior. I mean, there is no exact inner and outer anyways, but that it's sort of a magnetizing to itself, and that with this, thus, we're called to complete the circle. And of course, it's not done once you've completed it in one way and you've reconciled that part, a new part shows up. So I think what's really great is because it calls us to use all these different healing modalities, all these different creative opportunities, radically transform our education, healthcare, criminal justice systems. I think this assumption about who we are in terms of our will and choice, again, it really founds a lot. So there's this Aurobindo quote that I think is a really good call towards this. Before I read that quote really quickly, I think I'm going to go right up to 10:45, that's all right. What's up? Oh, okay. 10:44? Sorry, I had to kind of start late too, so we could, just have a good energetic feeling. No worries, thank you. Okay, so really quickly, practically, well, what does this mean? I'm going to go to a nice juicy piece of the radical mythospeculation class. It might have been the last one. Professor Swim has some really great recommendations for what this might look like. A, dwell in primal experience. Allow ourselves to tap in, not to have to intellectualize it and analyze it. Allow the cosmos to speak through us. Again, it's sort of a slowing down breath work, reflecting on events, the creative expressions of others. In that sense, feeling yourself embedded in the cosmogenesis. I think our mutual appreciation, our gratefulness, it's something we have actively available to us, and feeling this fragmentation that allows us a direct conduit to wholeness is gratefulness. It starts to heal almost instantly. The I thou universe asks for help. We're among subjects. We're not alone, like Whitehead's talking about. E, communion, forming groups. I think that's where I started the conversation. It is so deeply an invitation, this process. So with that, last quote. Here we go. Oh yeah, here we go. Okay. The Essential Aurobindo, Integral Yoga, 4/8 chapter. To see, know, become, and fulfill this one in our inner selves and in all our outer nature was always the secret goal, and becomes now the conscious purpose of our embodied existence. I'm going to just say that one more time. To see, know, become, and fulfill this one, capital O, in our inner selves and in all our outer nature was always the secret goal, and becomes now the conscious purpose of our embodied existence. So, a call to participate. I hope this was useful.